Hi, folks. Justin Rogers here. John Niyo joining me virtually in this new world, and trying something different today. We're trying to do a Lions video, maybe involve the readers a little bit, our subscribers, and kind of taking the place, I guess, of our Lions lowdown videos we've done the last couple years. John,
we can still call it the lowdown if you want. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shut my email off because that's dinging and probably noticeable to everyone that may watch this at some point. Technical difficulties.
Talk about the Lions, and they're still low right now where we left them. So
man.
You want to just kick it off that way?
Yeah, I think we might have had more viewers if we did this before the season started. We might have lost half the bandwagon already. How about that? We didn't do a post-game video, so I mean, we were sitting on different decks. We didn't really get the chance to talk as we normally do throughout the game and after the game. So, what are your initial takeaways from Sunday?
My initial thoughts were, you know what, I was getting ready to write a column there, and then at the point I suggested, you know what, maybe I'll just dust off that T.J. Hawkinson column. I ended up deleting after the fourth quarter in the opener last year in Arizona, and then I realized, no, I just can run the one that I wrote after that Arizona game, because it was just a carbon copy in so many ways. It was unbelievable that it just played out almost exactly the same way. Big lead, starting to get some optimistic thoughts if you're a Lions fan, then all of a sudden it just unravels kind of horrific fashion and leaves you with all those same questions, and you wrote about it today. I mean, all those same questions that it's not fair to pin on a new team, a new whatever, and yet when they do it again, then it does raise all those same questions about, okay, have we gotten anywhere? Where does this thing stand? Why is it the same thing? And again, it goes back to that same old Lions moniker that we thought we buried. They thought they'd buried, but you play like that in the fourth quarter down the stretch against Trubisky and the Bears in an opener, and we're going to ask those same questions until they prove that is truly behind them, and it's not right now.
Well, one thing I want to point out here is, as the viewers are slowly joining, is we will kind of be taking questions as this thing gets going. So feel free to drop those into the Zoom chat. We got a moderator that'll feed them to us, and we'll try to squeeze them in between our own long-winded speeches here. But John, we've been covering this long enough. You can never start writing a game story with the Lions for the last possible minute. I'm never going to forget the season with the 8 comebacks. I mean, how many game stories I trashed. I imagine same thing with you with how many columns you just had to delete and start over. Mm-hmm. I was guilty. Rod Beard with his hashtag start writing. I definitely had a pretty healthy game story ready to go about midway through the fourth quarter. You really shouldn't blow a 17-point lead in the fourth quarter. The Bears were not playing well, and I felt safe doing it. And I don't know why. Maybe I didn't have the warm-up the preseason. Maybe I was not prepared for what was to come next, and maybe I'd buried all the history that told me that was a bad idea, but burned again.
Yeah, so the reasons, quickly, we don't need to dwell a ton on the opener. There is another game this week that we can look forward to too. But look, you do have to dissect this a little bit. And so the question is, I mean, what happened? How did they blow it? Why did they blow it? And it still comes back to the defense. Injuries certainly played a role. I'm curious though, your thoughts. I mean, look, you lose essentially you're finishing that game without 3 of your top 4 cornerbacks. And that's part of the reason why Mitch Trubisky's making some of those throws. But they went man back to sort of their old, more familiar, predictable, if you will, coverage is there at the end. And Trubisky, I mean, you wrote about it. I mean, the play to Anthony Miller, that was almost a carbon copy. As again, I'm using that same language, but last year's Bears game. What do you think played into that fourth quarter defensive meltdown?
I think there's 4 reasons. You hit on one with the injuries. You take away that much of your secondary. It's always going to be tough to overcome. We don't give excuses to teams for injuries because that's just part of football. I think maybe if it was Matthew Stafford, maybe that's the one exception. Your quarterback goes out. Two, I look at the coaching decisions, and the one biggest one being the decision to kick the field goal from 55 yards out. You're up 10. I don't know the big difference between 10 and 13. I mean, mathematically, I understand it, but it's 4 minutes remaining. The Bears had not driven longer than 58 yards in the game to that point. You kick the punt. You force them to drive the length of the field. Your punter and your coverage units were playing excellent. There was a low risk there. Even if you were even worried about it remotely, you kick it out of bounds. You force them to drive the length of the field. Instead, they're in the end zone. I think it's 5 plays later. You look at the play of the quarterback, 2 big critical mistakes. One, taking the sack that pushed him back far enough where they're 55-yarder. 2, terrible interception. I mean, Eddie Jackson is a foil for Matthew Stafford. He's got him in the pass, and he got him there. And then, 4, you had the moment, you had the game back in your grasp, and then it slipped out of the rookie fingers. And I don't think there was any problem with the play call. I don't think there was any problem with the personnel. I don't think it was wrong to put a rookie in a big moment like that, because that's why you draft him that high, and that's his skill set.
Yeah.
There are moments like that happen in football games, and I'm sure the Lions fans can list 24 of them that have happened to them, and it seems like it happens to them more than anybody. But
and it sounds like a cliche when you say, well, it shouldn't have come down to that, but it's true. It shouldn't have come down to one play at the end. Yes, he dropped the pass that would have won the game, but it should not have come down. And you mentioned it. I mean, look, the sack Stafford took, you can't take. And maybe he admitted afterwards he would do it over again. He would throw that one away. The coaching decision, like you mentioned, I do think before that, the sort of conservative play calling on that drive, back-to-back sort of handoffs to Peterson, they're trying to force him to call their timeouts. I get it. But they had been a little more aggressive on the previous drive, throwing on first down a couple of times. The play calling wasn't an issue except for those couple plays where maybe I would take issue with, I got a little too much of we're just hanging on here and not being aggressive. But, the other thing, that felt like a Stafford, I got to do something. I got to do something on my own here. I'm going to rifle this in there, the pass to Jones over the middle. Amendola got jammed up on the line by Mack, and so then he just fires one in there that's across the middle where bad things can happen, and certainly a bad thing did happen. I think he was probably a little frustrated. Look, he has no Kenny Galladay out there, so all those deep shots, the Bears were playing 2 high safeties. I think he said something like 80% of the game. We haven't watched the film to look and see how accurate that is, but it felt like it, that they were keeping a lid on things. And, he didn't have those deep shots that we saw last year in the play action game as much, partly because Galladay's not there and partly because the Bears knew Galladay wasn't there. So I think there was a little bit of a here, I'm going to try to win this right here kind of thing, and it bit him.
I'd have to go back and look at it. I think you posted the stats in your column, the fourth quarter leads that have been blown under Patricia. Do you know the numbers off the top of your head?
It was 7 last year, felt like every game last year, but it's 7 last year and now 1 this year and 11. 11 in 33 games. That's hard to explain. It's impossible to ignore, and it's kind of hard to explain away, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think people are always going to want to comp Matt Patricia to the previous regime with Jim Caldwell, and I think that's absolutely a fair discussion. Jim Caldwell got let go with a winning record and back-to-back 9 and 7 seasons, and obviously Patricia has fallen far short of that. But
he's got 9 wins in 2+ years. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the one thing about Caldwell's team that I think we always were quick to praise was their poise, calmness, ability to finish close games. I mentioned it in jest with having to delete all those game stories, but they did have 8 fourth quarter comebacks that year.
Yeah,
and
right.
You go back and you look at the talent of those rosters, and they probably overachieved. I don't think many people would disagree with that. I look at the biggest flaw of Matt Patricia's coaching here is the way they finish games. We know NFL games are close. And I don't know if that's a reflection of his personality and having guys kind of on edge with his intensity and the way he kind of gets after guys and on the practice field and on the sideline. I don't know if it's an X's and O's thing, but for whatever reason, they can't get over the hump consistently with this guy. And, if they don't turn it around here in a hurry, that's ultimately going to be his undoing.
Yeah, and again, it's the defensive side of no, we just pointed out some offensive issues that led to the fact that it came down to the wire like that. But it's, by and large, it's been the defensive struggles that have cost them these games. And, again, top two cornerbacks are out. It felt like they had Trubisky rattled in the first half, playing a lot more zone, and maybe towards the end, especially with guys out, maybe they didn't feel comfortable doing some of that stuff. I don't know, but it did feel like they just sort of fell into a familiar trap at the end defensively. And if you're not getting pressure, which we've talked about that now for far too long, it seems like, but Trubisky got hit once, right, on Sunday. If that's happening, and then you've got, guys who you weren't expecting to be playing at the end of that game, yeah, you're going to get beat on some of those throws. And Trubisky made a couple of nice throws, but he made some awful throws. It could have been a lot worse. I mean, if it was Aaron Rodgers, which it's going to be this week, they're not up 17 points to lose that lead, because Trubisky was just erratic as advertised up until the end there.
I'm going to switch gears really quickly here. We got a question, and before we get into the Packers, I want to kind of hit that. There's a curiosity about how the team is handling the COVID threat and things that they're doing to prevent players from getting sick. And this isn't just a Lions thing. I think it was fairly impressive that there wasn't a positive test across the league on Sunday. In terms of what the Lions are doing, obviously league-wide COVID testing every day. I had to go through that as a reporter for 15 days during training camp. Little double nostril swab. You learn what it's all about real fast.
Wasn't as bad as I thought, by the way. Yeah, your daily routine. I mean, I went in for 2 just because I became incapacitated or went on vacation or just up and quit. I was going to fill in. And the reason, and I guess to explain, look, you guys are we're at practice. You guys the beat writers are at practice every day in camp. And it's outdoors unless, terrible weather. And that's a running joke, obviously, with Patricia and the snow practices and everything else. But the reason why you guys were getting tested was in case practice moved indoors, in order to be allowed to go indoors with the team and continue covering practice, training camp, you guys were going to have to get tested to go in that facility, because we're not going to set foot in that facility otherwise at all. The media room, everything else is closed this year for us. So yeah, they got a trailer out back, BioReference. You go in, get a swab up your nostril. It wasn't as bad as I thought. And then you've got those results the next morning. They've got them the next morning. So getting tested daily, you're preventing the outbreak, not preventing somebody from testing positive, obviously. And that's what these colleges are trying to figure out right now with the Big Ten and everything else, is how do we get daily or rapid testing? And the NFL has done it. I don't know how much they're paying, but it's a ton of money, I'm sure.
Yeah, the Lions did not have a positive test since they've started allowing players in the building. They had 8, including Matthew Stafford's false positive, before training camp started, before they were allowed in the building. They had to have 3 negative tests before they're even allowed in the facility. Within the facility, plexiglass everywhere. Obviously they have to fill out medical surveys every day, get their temperature taken every day. There's all kinds of social distancing that's been employed, whether it's the weight room, the training room, the cafeteria. All the food now is individually ordered through an app. And then the other thing is they have wearable microchip devices for when they're in the facility alone, but it's a contact tracing. So if there were to be a player, just random player that ends up testing positive, they're able to quickly track what players he was in contact with for the duration. And for periods of more than whatever it is, I can't remember, 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever. And then they're all wearing them, coaches, staff. Bob Quinn's wearing one. If you get within X number of feet of, the tier 1 guys or the players and coaches, and if they get within, X number of feet of somebody who's tier 2 like you,
beeps or whatever. And yeah, it's pretty impressive. To me, it's impressive that we're playing football here this fall without, a rash of positives and really without any serious problems like Major League Baseball had. We'll see now as teams go on the road and travel, but football's a lot more. They're cooped up all day. I mean, they're in the facility. They don't have as much downtime as baseball or some of these other sports have. So I think that's one thing that football has going for it, at least at the NFL level.
It does seem like
I'm curious. The entire operation is amazing to sort of behold, and then to think about moving all of that on the road like they're going to do this week. I am kind of curious to see what all that goes into that, because it's got to be a huge undertaking.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little nerve-wracking. You're going on the road with me this week, correct?
No, you got Woj.
Well,
in Green Bay, in Arizona, which is
it's nerve-wracking. It's going to be the first flight I've taken since the pandemic has really hit its stride, and I think the other thing to say really quickly about just the lack of positive tests, it's amazing to me how well, I guess, maybe the peer pressure is working around the league. I think there's this don't screw it up for everybody else attitude. And of course, we've seen a few cases where guys have kind of, the guy in Seattle tried to sneak someone to the dorms, and that became a big national story. And I think coaches can say, look, here's what happens when you're a moron.
Yeah.
You could point to the Marlins case or the Cardinals case, and I don't know what, I never bothered researching what separated reality from fiction there, but it sounds like there was some irresponsible behavior. And so,
and it definitely helped the NFL to be able, or coaches to be able to point to that and say, look,
no question,
we can't, this whole thing blows up if this happens. And look, training camp's a little different. Everybody's in a hotel, not everybody, but all the rookies are in a hotel and whatever. So it's now they're on their own a little bit more when they're away from the facility. A Tuesday, an off day, they're away from the facility more. So maybe there are some chances that teams are going to start having some more positive cases here, but it's been pretty impressive so far. And game day itself, I mean, we were there on Sunday. It was a strange environment. Lambeau Field is going to me, feel even strange. I won't be there, but it's going to feel even stranger. That scene at Lambeau, the tailgating, it's more of a college atmosphere. That's going to be really bizarre to make that drive into the stadium and park in that lot, and then I don't know if there are going to be any people outside in the lots or not.
There are going to be people.
You're not going to have fans in the stadium, and that's going to be strange. And I will say, I think we'll hear about it this week, but teams are going to have to figure out some way, like you could hear everything in that stadium on Sunday at Ford Field. I mean, you could hear the Bears yelling on the sideline as they were making a comeback. You could hear, when there were some injuries and it was just dead silent in there. It was really strange. But you could also hear all of, Friday from Matthew Stafford and some of his calls of the line. That stuff's going to have to get changed week to week because everybody else is listening to it on the game film this week.
Hey, John, we got another fan question here.
All right.
Who among the players was the most disappointing in the opener for you?
Yeah.
It wasn't Adrian Peterson.
No, it was not. And it wasn't DeAndre Swift. I think people were expecting some big flashy debut from the rookie running back, and obviously it ended horribly for him. But he got out there and did some things, scored a touchdown. To be honest, if you're matching it in terms of expectations, I would say Stafford, but that was partly due to, I think, not having Galladay there. But some of the mistakes at the end are mistakes he can't make if you're going to win a game, especially against a division rival. And also in his defense too, he hadn't played a game since November? When did he? Early November last year. I mean, he missed the last half of last year, so he had some rust to shake off too in terms of the game situation. Some of those late game moments, he hadn't done that in a long time, so maybe that's part of it too. But I thought he forced the issue a couple times when he didn't have to, and it cost him. So I would say him. I mean, there's plenty of choices on defense, and then I would also say the biggest disappointment, I think, and fans probably felt this going in, not seeing Jeff Okudah out there. I mean, your number one pick, we talked up in some cases all off season, he's not out there, and then in the end, when he would have made perhaps significant difference with all the injuries you had. Yeah, that was, I think, frustrating for fans for sure.
Yeah, that Stafford interception. I mean, it's just not a year 11 mistake.
No.
If you make that pass and you try to force something in the second quarter, you go, okay, that was a bad play. You move on. In a crunch time situation, like he knows better. It just was it was a bad decision. Trying to do too much.
There were some drops earlier too. I mean, his numbers weren't great early on.
Sure.
Half it was just kind of ugly all the way around, both teams. You're expecting that more so from Mitch Trubisky than Matthew Stafford, but there were some drops. Cephas had a drop. I can't remember. There was one or two other drops.
Marvin, yeah.
Jones had one. It looked like a guy trying to force things at the end, and it cost him.
Well, and speaking of veterans making dumb mistakes,
Jamie
Collins.
That's a better one.
What I would say is the most disappointing. You bring in him, you pay him more than any of these other defensive pieces you brought in. He was supposed to be the Swiss Army knife, and we got to see him all of a quarter and a half before he got himself ejected for.
I feel like that long.
such an immature mistake. Like, it just blows your mind that he would. Yeah. I don't even know where his brain went in that moment to think it was okay to, and I know it looked like nothing, and I know what he was trying to do, but you just
can't
have to know the line, and he clearly crossed it and got the boot, and Lions were counting on that, counting on him. To think that he didn't have a role, whether it was bringing pressure on the quarterback or dropping into coverage and maybe covering some of those zones underneath as Trubisky's picking apart the secondary in the fourth quarter. Collins was sorely missed for sure.
Yeah. No, he had one particular poor play where he overran something early on. I remember it stood out. And then, you're expecting him to be the Swiss Army knife guy that you're doing all sorts of things with. And luckily for them, I think they have depth at that position. So I think they were able to cover it up, his loss, maybe a little bit easier than they did in some of those injuries in the secondary. But yeah, that was a huge loss. And like you said, it's an inexcusable mistake. I mean, Patricia always talks about bad football. That's bad football. And they have not gotten rid of bad football.
Yeah, a lot of missed tackles, some drops. I think we all expected some degree of sloppiness with no preseason, with no OTAs, just not a lot of time to focus on those fundamentals you normally would. But guess what? Green Bay coming up. And Aaron Rodgers did not look like he was missing those preseason games. I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, but it's something like 73% completions, 4 touchovers, somewhere like 400 yards. Like, good time for your secondary to be screwed.
Yeah, and we spent the entire offseason, the league, everybody covering the league, spent the entire offseason talking about how PO'd he'd be. Drafted Jordan Love. They didn't draft a receiver that he needed in the first round again. And, year one, there were always some questions going in with the new coach. I thought they got along fairly well last year, but maybe they're sort of moving away from him. And then to go out there they held the ball, I think it was like 41, 42 minutes against the Vikings. Just mauled them there at the end. I mean, they marched down the field, 2 late touchdowns to just completely seal it. Behind an offensive line that got super banged up John Runyon, Michigan rookie from Michigan, 6th round pick, ended up playing the last 15 snaps of the game at right guard for them because of the injuries. It didn't look like any problems there for the Packers in that offense. And then you think about, I don't know what you expect this week in terms of injuries. Justin Coleman went on IR today, so that means he's gone till after the bye week.
That just happened while we were doing this officially, by the way.
Oh, okay, good. So he's out 3 weeks. It's not 8 weeks like it used to be in the COVID rules. Now you've got a 3-week short-term IR. But still, he's gone. Just watching it, Desmond Trufant, he was sort of changing directions and just in the middle of a play grabbed the back of his right hamstring and went down on one knee. So that didn't, to me, feel like a one he's going to be out there running around Sunday. You never know. These guys are amazing athletes, but chance he's not out there. So then what does your secondary look like?
Not great. So listen, I thought Darryl Roberts came in and he's got a lot of experience. He's played for Patricia before. He can play both inside and outside, and he made some plays.
He's probably your slot Sunday.
Yeah, he might be the. I mean, it depends on Okudah, right? And
so if Okudah plays, you've got Okudah and Oruwariye on the outside, and Roberts at the slot. I mean that.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if let's say Okudah's cleared. They might not give him 70 snaps. They might not give him all. So he might be splitting times with Roberts. Roberts plays outside in those situations, moves inside on nickel packages.
Play a ton of 3 safety looks like they did. Yeah. Which is probably 80% of the time almost. It felt like.
Sure.
Practice squad, D Virgin is there. I'm drawing a blank as to who else they kept on the practice squad, but he's a guy that you would think might get a promotion. I mean, Mike Ford is there, played obviously. He's a guy who's been around long enough that you can probably feel like you trust him in a bigger role. But yeah, it's a dicey situation going against any team, but let alone the Packers and Aaron Rodgers.
You think the Lions aren't going to compete with the Packers. Week 17 last season, the Packers were playing for a bye. The Lions were playing for nothing with David Blau, and they fought tooth and nail in that game, and it went down to the wire. So, as much as I feel like Aaron Rodgers is ready to hang 70 points on the secondary, it still is an NFC North battle. I think Patricia's seen enough of Aaron Rodgers that he has been able to scheme up some good stuff for him. I think if it goes down to the fourth quarter again, I just don't. There's no reason for me to trust this Lions team to emerge victorious if this game is close, especially as you just described the Packers marching down the field on the Vikings defense, which is a far more cohesive unit that's largely been together for some time with a really good proven defensive head coach.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, and I mean, Darrell Bevell had a pretty good game plan called for them last year in Lambeau Field. First half, they lights out, play action deep multiple times. It would obviously be a huge help if Galladay is ready. And he looked like a guy they were being super cautious with this injury. Didn't look like one that's going to extend for a long time. But I guess we'll see Wednesday, Thursday this week if he's out there at practice running around. But that would be a huge help, and they're going to have to outscore him. I mean, feels like you're going to need 30 points maybe to beat Aaron Rodgers if your defense is as banged up as it looks. But you're also going to need that. We're sort of the opposite of last year. Last year, the secondary was healthy and the front was decimated coming out of training camp and preseason for the Lions. This year, it's the opposite. I mean, you've got all the guys you were waiting on up front and in that linebacking core, and they're going to have to get some more pressure. Now, I don't know if Julian Okwara he needs to play more than 7 snaps. Maybe he's ready for a little bit bigger role if he's going to be your guy that's going to get you some situational pass rush. But they're going to have to do more than what they did on Sunday against Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah, I don't know who's going to cover Adams. Like that's just what I keep coming back to. Like, who covers the guy that Darius Slay always said was one of the toughest covers in football, and just went off for I don't know how many catches. He had 2 touchdowns. Really torched that Vikings secondary. Let me ask you this, because I'm curious. You have been around this team a little bit longer than I have. We talk about it, and it gets asked to the coach, and he takes the right approach for what he needs to do. But how much do you think a demoralizing loss like Week 1 carries over? Especially in the early season, how much do you think they're going to have to worry about the mental aspect of where this team is at? Do you think there's a fragility there, or do you think they're going to shake it off?
I don't actually. And I think last year was maybe a decent show of that. I mean, that was almost as big a gut punch, losing that opener in Arizona and coming back, but they rebounded pretty well. I think these guys all have. We talked about buy-in in year 1 with Patricia. If this was 2018, yeah, I think, and we probably saw it in 2018 in some ways, but I think there'd be a bigger concern about guys checking out or guys, what are we doing here? This isn't this isn't working. I think these guys all more or less, by and large, believe in what they're trying to do and the message that they're getting from the coaching staff. So I don't think that's an issue. I also think, I mean, the caveat to all of this is week one in the NFL is always sort of overreaction, and week one to week two, it almost seems like it turns on a dime. This year, I imagine it's going to be even more so. And I do think teams are going to be able to go on the road and have a lot more success in the NFL, especially early this season when there's no fans in these buildings than a year ago. So I think there are certainly reasons where you can find some optimism in terms of the message and the, are they going to pack it in? No, of course they're not going to pack it in. But I do think, we're probably overreacting to one loss. To me, the bigger concern is the injuries and, okay, do you have the bodies and the positions you need to go ahead and have it, come up with a game plan to beat Aaron Rodgers and the Packers in Green Bay.
Yeah, it's because if they go 0-2, that's 12% of the season gone, and winless after 12% of the season. It's just there is that extra playoff spot this year. There is a little bit more of a leeway to recover, but
But you're 0-2 in the division then, and
it's not good.
The division is the pathway to the that's how you make sure you make the playoffs, is you win divisional games, and they haven't done that in Patricia's. He's 2-11 now in the division in his time in Detroit. You're not going to make the playoffs with a record like that, and they know that. Schedule does not do them any favors because it's Green Bay here, and then they go Arizona, which I thought they were going to be a sort of an it team this year, and they certainly look like it in the opener against San Francisco. And then you come home and play the Saints, who, I think a lot of people have them winning the NFC. So as crazy as it sounds, if you're going to win a game, it might be this week.
All right, so you already kind of hit on this a little bit in a previous answer. We have a fan question just about how team culture's improved. Do the team respect the coaching staff now, and what's causing the execution discipline? I think the buy-in is there. They've completely turned over the roster and brought out or moved out, I guess, the players that weren't meshing with Patricia's style. They've replaced them with guys like Danny Amendola and Trey Flowers and 100% Patricia guys. I don't think there's a buy-in problem. And let's face it, culture is largely overrated. Culture is buying into what's there, but what determines a successful culture is winning. Yep. And so has that culture improved? Nope, not yet. In terms of execution and discipline, I think if we knew the answers there on why they were falling short, probably would have a better job, maybe as a football coach.
Teams are hiring. Execution-wise, I do wonder if there's some schematic things defensively that are just sort of they haven't been able to get over. And I don't know if it's the sort of the over-reliance on man coverage Patricia seems to obviously prefers, and whether that's an issue or not. And then offensively, look, you're going to have guys make plays, but you're also going to have to guys are going to have to not make those big mistakes. And Stafford made a couple of big ones. Obviously, DeAndre Swift one made at the end. But positives, we should hit on some positives. I thought the offensive line was pretty good for a debut. And that gives you some hope. If you're a Lions fan, I thought they looked like a unit that could be pretty solid.
Haven't even seen the right tackle yet.
Yeah, right. Special teams was a question mark to me, I thought, just because you got a new coordinator, you got a new specialist there in the punter. That was a bonus.
He's their best player.
And then Adrian Peterson, I wondered about the running game, especially Kerryon Johnson. We don't know what, coming off the injuries and everything else. And then them going out and getting Adrian Peterson sort of adds to that question mark in some ways. He looked like Adrian Peterson who could run for 1,000 yards on Sunday. Some of that is the way the Bears were playing defense, and again with two safeties high or whatever, but he ran hard. He ran like Adrian Peterson has run his entire career, just not quite as maybe as fast, but he looked like a guy who should be able to carry the load in a lot of ways. So that was impressive, I thought, too. So there are some positives there, and if they can get some of these guys back, like Kenny Galladay, I think there is some chance for that offense still to be as good as we thought it was going to be.
Good news on the Adrian Peterson front. Packers got pretty chewed up on the ground by the Vikings. Similar style back in Dalvin Cook. I believe he replaced Adrian Peterson in Minnesota. But I think Minnesota ran for like something like 6-point-something yards per carry. So good chance that continues. Need to wrap this up, John. I'm already late for these coordinator conference calls, but we did get one last fast fan question, and it's predictable. When does Matt Patricia get the boot?
Week 1. Yeah.
Fans would have. I think fans would have been just fine with pulling the plug in week 1. That was clearly never going to happen. But could you see a situation where they do it in the middle of the season, or is this pandemic just make that even more?
Yeah, I think logistically it's such a nightmare. I mean, I always think it's more for show than anything else.
No question.
When that happens in the NFL, you see a guy, Cincinnati does it or whatever. I suppose there are interim options. I mean, a guy like Darrell Bevel could be an interim head, whatever. But no, I don't think it's going to happen because clearly the GM, the coach, and the quarterback are all sort of tied at the hip here. And you were there in the office with the new owner, last December. They've bought into the plan and everything else. They are impatient, but not as impatient as somebody who's just going to go and give a pink slip in week 4 or whatever, going into a bye week. I don't think we're going to see a London massacre like we had after, in 2005 when Martha Firestone Ford, fired the president and the GM or anything like that. And that's what it's going to take because I think they are tied together.
Yeah, I know you just mentioned the schedule. I can't envision what it's going to be like if they get through that first quarter of the season and they end up winless. Like, that there's going to be so much anger and maybe they're going to get away with it because there's no fans in the stands to boo. There's nobody in the stands to have that infamous bag on their head.
Yeah.
So
no, in some ways the schedule and everything, it does feel a little like 2015, which started out awfully and ended up with people getting fired. But I just don't see that sort of drastic move happening until after the season.
Well, we'll probably know a little bit more after Sunday. Hopefully we're not coming back here and talking about a 50-14 loss. But who knows? Who knows what kind of secondary they'll be able to cobble together.
No, you're right. And I will say, in parting, I do think Packers have some injury issues too. I mean, they lost an offensive lineman for the season. Kenny Clark is also injured. They got some issues too. Everybody got injury issues in the league this time of year, especially with no preseason and no off season really. So the Lions are not alone in that. I think it's just a little glaring in the one position that we talked about.
Which is why it's too early to make a prediction.
That's right.
So for John Niyo, I'm Justin Rogers. I don't know how this went on your end. Hopefully there weren't too many technical difficulties, but we'll probably give this a go again sometime soon.
Yes, we will. All right.
Thanks for joining us, folks.